Resourceful Designer, Episode 5. Don't compromise your principles.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. The first computer he ever bought was a Macintosh LC2, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to Resourceful Designer. I am very happy that you've joined me this week. I'm actually thrilled that you have taken the time to listen to this podcast. And I want to thank everybody who has sent me positive feedback on Facebook, on Twitter, and via email, telling me how much they enjoyed the 4 episodes I launched with last week. And I especially want to send a special shout out to Masked Matinee, who left me my very first iTunes review. And the review reads, "A fun podcast with an engaging host who knows the subject matter quite well. What more could you want in a podcast?" Well, I want to thank you for that. Reading that review really validated to me that I was doing something good with this podcast. I know with all my experience in design and running my own business, I have a lot to share, but it's nice to get that validation. So thank you for that lovely 5-star review. And if anybody else is interested in leaving me a review, you can do so by heading to resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and that'll redirect you straight to the podcast page on iTunes. Now, I'm happy to say that the podcast is now officially also on Stitcher. So if you're someone that likes to use the Stitcher app to consume their audio content, you can look for Resourceful Designer right there. Or just visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Stitcher, and that'll redirect you to the page. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about the principles, the morals, the ethics behind your design choices and the choices you make in running your business. But before I get to that, I have a resource I'd like to share with you. Now, every good business needs some software to help you run, to manage your paperwork, to send out your invoices, to manage collections. And what I've been using for the past 10 years since I started my business is a program called Billings Pro by Market Circle. Now, Billings Pro is a Mac-only software. So if you're on a PC, I'm sorry, but Billings Pro is Mac-only. But it is a wonderful program for sending out estimates, managing your clients, sending invoices, keeping track of taxes. It has a handy built-in timer that I absolutely love. So every time I start a job, if I'm billing by the hour, the timer sits in my menu bar at the top. I just click on it, start my timer. The timer, I tell it what job I'm associating the timer with. I start it, and at the end, I can know exactly right down to the minute how much time I spent on a certain job. And I've got it set up that if I forget to turn it off, if I get up from my computer, if the computer's idle for 3 minutes, the timer automatically stops. And the next time I get to the computer, a little message will pop up and say, "Your timer was stopped automatically. Do you want to continue timing, or do you want to pause the timer, or do you want to remove any additional time that's occurred since the computer went idle?" And since I got that was so helpful because now I don't have to guess on how much time a project is. I know right down to the minute how much time I've spent on a project. And Billings Pro, they have the Mac version, they also have the iOS version, and they have an Apple Watch version. So you can keep track of stuff on the go. If you have a meeting with your client and you have an Apple Watch, you can just call up the app, start the timer, and you're actually keeping track of the time you spend dealing with that client. You can also track mileage and all sorts of stuff. And it's really easy come tax season because you can easily print off all the reports that your accountant needs to do your paperwork. Now, I am not an affiliate with Market Circle or Billings Pro. It's just software that I've been using for the past 10 years, and I recommend it to any designer. It's really helped me run my business. So if you are interested, head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com/billings, that's with an S at the end, and you can try their 30-day free trial to see if it works for you. Now, today I wanted to talk about something that happens to all designers at one point in your life. And that's when you're asked to do something and that little voice in your head pipes up and tells you, "I don't know if this is a good idea." Now, it could be on moral grounds, on ethical grounds, but whatever it is, somehow that little voice is saying that if you go forth, you'd be compromising your principles, either personally, professionally, or just in general design. Now, this could be very tough, especially for the new designer, somebody who's just set up shop or is in the process of setting up shop. Because at that point, you really don't want to be turning work away. It's hard enough to find clients. Can you really afford to say no to a client when he brings you a project that you just don't feel comfortable with? And the answer to that is yes, you should be able to say no. The last thing you want to do is compromise your principles when it comes to yourself, your business, and your design. Because not only will you feel bad, but you never know when word or how word will get around, and it could affect your business. But it can be really hard to turn down the money or the offer of publicity for your business or the promise of more work to come in the future. Those are really hard things to say no to. But you got to remember that you're building a business here, and it's not the short term that's going to gauge your success. It's the long term, and that's where these decisions are important. Now, maybe you've been lucky and you haven't had to make these decisions before, but chances are you will encounter it at some point. I know that since I've been in business for myself, have turned down a few jobs that would have been really lucrative, but for one reason or the other, I just couldn't go forward with them. In one case, I lost a real good existing client, and in another case, a good potential client decided to go somewhere else. In the first case, I had been doing design work for one client for many years, and this was a really good client because they ran so many different businesses. They had restaurants, they had corner stores, they had gas stations, they ran a telecommunications company, and they ran a tobacco company. And on top of all that, I also did design work for the parent company that oversaw all these different companies. And I was the designer they went to for everything they had. And I made a lot of money off this client over the years when I first started out. And then one day they came to me and asked me for their tobacco company. They wanted me to design some posters that would be appealing to teenagers to try to entice them to try their cigarettes. Now, they didn't word it in the way that they wanted me to entice teenagers to start smoking. They came at it from the angle that their target market were teenagers that were already smoking. They just wanted the teenagers to switch to their brand, and they wanted me to devise some sort of advertising campaign that would entice these teenagers to do that. And this was something I was against for both moral reasons and ethical reasons. Not to mention that my wife is a registered nurse and she works at a public health unit, and one of their mandates is to educate people on the dangers of smoking. So I couldn't justify, with my wife working there, me doing the opposite, and I'm creating an advertising campaign trying to entice people to smoke. Now, as I said, this had been a client I had done many jobs for over many years, and I had made a lot of money off of them. And I told them that I couldn't do this. This is not a project I could do. And they came at me with a all or nothing. They said, Mark, you either do this project or we're going to take our business elsewhere. And that was a tough decision because this was in the early years. Within a year or two, I had actually started working for this client when I was at the print shop. And when I left the print shop that I worked at before, that client followed me because they liked, I was the exclusive designer they were using at the print shop. They followed me when I started my own business. And I did some work for about 1.5 to 2 years. And then they came at me with this ultimatum. Either you design this thing or we take all our job elsewhere. And I had to say, sorry, it's been nice dealing with you, but I can't go through with this. And I turned down a lot of money because of it. Now, at the time, they were one of my biggest clients. And I was really shaken about this because it really affected my bottom line. And I did wonder how I was going to make ends meet for a while there. But in the long run, looking back, I'm glad I didn't do it. From time to time, I'll see some of the marketing pieces that they're putting out now that are done by another design firm. And yes, I look and say, well, that could have been me, and I could have made a ton of money off of them because they were spending money left and right. And they're still, from what I hear, spending money left and right on all their various businesses. But to me, compromising my principles just wasn't an option, and I couldn't do that. So I gave them up, and I haven't really regretted it. Now, the other client I mentioned was somebody that was referred to me. And this was a client who was starting a brand new business where he was going to be importing and distributing adult novelty toys, let's put it that way. And he had been referred to me because he had heard of all the great work I've been doing. So I sat down and I met with him to see what the whole project would be about. And he wanted me to design his branding, his packaging, because he was importing stuff from overseas and he was going to be repackaging it here under his own brand. So the scope of the project was a lot more than just designing. I was going to act as a full art director on this. He wanted me to organize photo shoots and contact modeling agencies for girls that would look good on the packaging, if you know what I mean. And anyways, in the long run, this would have been a huge job. And he told me what his budget was, what he was willing to pay me. And at the time, it would have been the biggest job I had ever had as a solo designer. And not that I'm against anything with the industry. It's a very lucrative industry. But the problem is I work from home. And at the time, I had 2 young kids. And I couldn't guarantee that I would be able to do all the work while the kids were away at school, or it just wasn't feasible for me to only do this at night. And I had to take that into consideration. So that was a job I turned down on my own personal principles. And I just didn't want to take the chance that one day I would be reviewing photos sent to me by a photographer and have my young son or young daughter walk into the room and see a bunch of naked women on my screen. So even though that would have been the biggest project I had ever worked on as a solo designer working for myself, I had to turn it down on those counts. So those are 2 different examples. One of them I turned down on moral and ethical principles, and the second one I turned down more on personal principles. There was nothing I was morally or ethically against with the adult products. I just didn't want to take the chance of working on that sort of project at home where my kids could see it. And in both those cases, I turned down a lot of money for my principles. Now, it doesn't only come down to money and dealing with clients like this. Other things that may affect your business is when clients ask you to do stuff design-wise that you know just isn't right. And this isn't a case of, can you make the logo bigger or can you change the font or something like that. I'm talking when the client comes at you and says, I want you to design something like this. And you know that whatever they're talking about is bad design. And you don't want to do it because they might go out afterwards and tell somebody who designed it for them. And if the people that they show it to don't think the same way your client does and thinks that's exactly what they want, they might look at that and think, I don't want to deal with this person, and word will spread. Now, in those cases, it's your job as a designer. It doesn't matter if you're a graphic designer or a web designer. It's your job as a designer to instruct your clients and sometimes put your foot down. You know, the saying is the client is always right. Well, the client is always right unless they're dead wrong, in which case it's your job to tell them that they're wrong. Now, I know some clients will be stubborn and they'll insist, but you really have to be firm and tell them it's wrong. Sometimes people don't realize that as designers, we are professionals in what we do. I mean, if they were to hire an electrician to do a job for them and they tell the electrician, I want you to run the wires here and do this, and the electrician comes back to them and say, no, I won't do that on just principle. It's dangerous, it won't work, and I refuse to do it. The person's not going to tell the electrician, well, it doesn't matter, I want you to do it anyways. They're going to say, well, okay, you're the professional, you're the expert, I'll follow your opinion. Well, we should expect the same thing as designers. And when it comes to situations like this, we shouldn't be telling our clients, I don't think you should do it like this. We should come right out and say, no, you shouldn't be doing like this. It's wrong. I mean, could you imagine you go to a lawyer and you say, I want you to write up my contract, and the lawyer comes back to you and says, well, I don't like this here and I don't really think you should do this. The lawyer won't say that. The lawyer is going to come back to you and say, no, you can't do it like this. It won't work. Well, we should be able to do the same thing. Now, I know law and design, it's, one hand and the other is not the same thing, but you get what I'm trying to say. We are professional designers. We have trained for this, and our clients should respect that training and that knowledge and that expertise that they came to us for, because they didn't have to come to us. They could have had their next door neighbor's nephew's brother or whoever design something for them, probably much cheaper. But they came to us because we are the professionals. So we have to act that way. And when they want us to do something, we have to come out and tell them, no, we can't do that. We can do this way. And you suggest a better way to do it. You don't compromise your design principles. I had a client come to me and to design a website for him. And he wanted all the text, different places on his homepage to flash. He wanted stuff blinking. And yes, it is possible. And yes, luckily you don't see a lot of websites doing it today, but there was a time 10, 15 years ago where it was really popular for stuff to blink and flash and scroll across web pages. And my client loved that. He thought that drew attention to things, and he wanted his whole page to have all these blinking texts and everything. And I came out and I told him, I says, no, I will not do that. I told him, as a professional designer, it's gaudy, it doesn't work, and I refuse to do it. If you want that for your web page, you'll have to go somewhere else. And that was a case where the customer wasn't always right. And then I found out afterwards that one of the reasons he wanted to do that is because his competition's website had all that stuff on it, and he knew his competition was bigger than he was. But when we got down and we looked at the competition's website hadn't been updated in, I think it was 7 or 8 years. And when I pointed that out to him, I said, listen, your competition is not spending the money on the website. You are. Why don't we build a better website for you, something that people are going to appreciate more? And that conversation turned into a whole new design for his website. And in the long run, he ended up thanking me for it. And even though he kept trying to throw in, well, can we just make this one line of text blink, or can we make this one word blink? And I refused at every step. And I told him, I said, listen, you hired me as the design professional. Let me do my job to make you look good. And in the end, several years later now, he has grown much bigger than what his competition was. And even though I don't do a lot of work for him these days, he still remembers that and he thanks me from time to time. And that's because I wouldn't compromise my design principles. And sometimes it's not only the design. There was another client that I was designing it was both a website and a brochure. And this client owned a spa, a day spa. And on her brochure and on her website, she wanted to talk about all the benefits of this new machine, state-of-the-art machine that she had received. And she was sending me all the copy to go on both pieces. And I wrote back to her, or actually I phoned her, and I says, I will not use this copy on your brochure because it's not going to be effective. Because what she was doing was she wanted to let her clients know all the selling features that led her to buy the machine. And I had to explain to her that those selling features were great for you to buy the machine because you were the user, the end user of the machine. You needed those features in order to be convinced to buy it. But her clients who were going to her spa because they wanted a relaxing day and treatment, her clients wanted to know how that machine would benefit them, make their life better. They were not interested in how it made the spa operator better. And yet that's what she saw. She wanted me to repeat all the benefits that were used to sell her on the device, like all the various attachments that went on it, how this machine used a lot less power than previous machines, how it was much smaller than previous generations of the machines. These were all things that didn't matter to the end client, the client going to the spa for treatment. They just wanted to know how this machine would help make their skin be younger, how this machine would help eliminate wrinkles or eliminate blackheads or whatever they were going to use it for. They didn't need to know the technical side. They just needed to know that the machine would work. And it took me a long time to get that idea across to her, but I wouldn't budge. She kept telling me what to put on and I wouldn't budge. And again, I told her, I said, I'm the professional here. My job is creating these marketing pieces, and I've been doing it for many, many years, creating things to help people sell their services and their products. Let me do that. Let me create something that'll sell your service to others. And in the long run, I was persistent enough that she let me do what I wanted, and we created a great website and a great brochure, and she has had tremendous success and tremendous growth in our area because of them. Because what's on the site is what her clients want to see. And I've seen that. This is just one example, one client I'm talking about. I've seen this many, many times over the years where people don't think of their client when they're creating their marketing pieces. They create the marketing piece that they themselves would be interested in, and they don't realize that it's not the same thing. So this is a case where, as I said, it's not really design principle, but kind of the overall principle of the project. You have to tell them, you have to put your foot down and tell your client, this won't work, and I won't do it for you because you will be wasting money. You can pay me and I will do this, but why would I want to do something that will cause you not to make the money that you deserve? So those are just a few examples of things that you should be aware of when you're dealing with your clients, whether it's ethical principles or moral principles or design principles. People don't often see us as experts that we are. Unlike plumbers and lawyers and electricians and those people who they view as an expert and they wouldn't question their opinion, our opinion is questioned. So it's our job to educate our clients, to stand firm and tell them that no, there's certain things that we can't do or that we won't do. And in some cases, when it comes to ethical or moral decisions, you have to be ready to lose a client because of it. Could you imagine if I had given in because of the money and designed that poster appealing to teenagers to switch to their brand of cigarettes? If word got out, not only would it put a bad name on my company, imagine the repercussions it would have had on my wife, who's a nurse at a public health unit. So whenever you hear that little voice in your head that says, wait a minute, I don't know if this is right, or I don't know if I should do this, listen to that voice, because more often than not, its instincts are correct. And trust me, when you look back many years later, you'll realize that losing that client or losing that big job in the grand scheme of things wasn't that big a deal. I would love to know what you thought of this episode, and if you've ever had to deal with a client and the dilemma that might compromise your principles. Leave a comment on the website. Just look up resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 5 and leave a comment. Tell me what you think and tell me your story. Now, I'd love for you to be more interactive with me. You could do so by following me at Twitter at ResourcefulD. Unfortunately, Resourceful Designer was too long for a Twitter handle, so I had to settle for ResourcefulD. You can like my Facebook page at facebook.com/resourcefuldesigner. And if you want to send me a quick note, head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and just fill out the form on that page. Now, in next week's episode of Resourceful Designer, I'll be talking about various myths about starting and running a design business from home. So until next time, keep working on building your design business. I'm Mark Decote, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.